I'm so excited to show you this today, guys. This is something I never heard of until just a few months ago. And just yesterday, I, for the first time, cooked using this special fat that is absolutely amazing that I think you really want to know about. By the way, did you know that I have a page full of coupons and special offers just for you guys? Offers that I put together that changes pretty often, things that I really love that I think you'll love too. So go check it out, soulyrested.com/coupons. In fact, while you're there, bookmark the page, save it, pin it on Pinterest, whatever you do to keep track of things, because you want to check it pretty often. So today we're talking about a fat in an animal that a lot of people don't talk about that you really need to know about. I can't wait to tell you about what I just discovered for myself. Before we butchered our own pigs, I had no idea that this fat even existed. I knew that there was fat that you could render into lard. Just recently did that myself for the first time. And there are two different kinds of fat that you can render into lard. There's the back fat that's good for lard for cooking. And then there's the inner fat or the leaf fat that's good for actually using like for baking to substitute in place of butter even. It's a prettier, purer. They're both really good fats. But I had no idea about this third kind. While with the back fat and the leaf fat, you have large pieces of it. For the back fat, you have a large, long chunk of it that you can cut off and render down. And for the inner fat, the leaf fat, you have big wads of it that you can render. This fat, it's called the caul fat. And it is just a very thin layer around the inner digestive organs of an animal. You actually can use the caul fat from quite a few different animals, but from what I hear, the caul fat on a pig is the most prized. So I was so excited when our butcher explained to me how to use it. I started doing some research and investigating some things on my own, and I came up with another way that I wanted to use it. And today we're talking about both. So, first of all, you want to clean it off and let it dry thoroughly between something like I used old sheets. Once it's dry, you can then freeze it. I actually folded mine up until it fit in a Ziploc bag, put it right in the freezer, and let it sit there for a couple months. When it was time to make our first pork loin roast from our pigs, I knew I wanted to use my caul fat. From what I understand, caul fat in a pig is a really prized kind of fat because it has a slight taste of bacon that you won't find in other caul fats. From other animals, it will still give you the added moisture to your meat, but you're not going to get that added bacon-like flavor, which is so good. So, on the day that I was going to make my pork loin roast, I simply pulled my caul fat Ziploc bag out of the freezer. And I very carefully unfolded it. I was afraid it was going to be fragile and it was going to break on me. Not at all. It was very forgiving. It unfolded very easily. And then I just let it lay there for only a few minutes and it was ready to use. And I'm really glad that I didn't defrost it earlier. I had read different people had said, oh, defrost it in warm water, set it out for many hours. Not true, none of that. I just laid it out a few minutes and it was ready to use. So once my caul fat had laid there for a few minutes, I was ready to season my loin roast. I started with just salt and pepper. I put a generous amount of both all over it and rubbed it in. And then I got out some fresh herbs that I had grown this summer here on our farm, but of course you can use herbs that you buy. I said fresh. I mean, they were originally fresh, but I did dry them. They wouldn't last this long fresh now that it's winter in New England. But anyway, obviously you can use fresh herbs if it's summertime and you're doing this recipe, or you can certainly use dried herbs. I just got a combination of thyme and rosemary and crushed it up. I added some garlic salt. At that point, I hesitated bothering getting out the fresh garlic to mince it, but I'm so glad I did. Do not skip that if you're making this recipe, because the fresh garlic added so much flavor to the pork roast. And it's held in place by the caul fat. And the juices from the caul fat are seeping into your minced garlic and your herbs and getting into the meat. So good. Don't skip the minced garlic. And I'll leave the recipe details in the show notes so that you can just scroll down and get the full recipe. Okay, so I hesitated also to add garlic salt, because then once I decided to use the fresh minced garlic, I'm like, will it be too much garlic? It was not too much garlic. It was perfect. And then to hold it all together and make it nice to rub it on my meat, I added, of course, some maple syrup. You could, if you don't have maple syrup, first of all, don't tell me if you don't have maple syrup in your house, because I'm pretty much the maple queen, so don't tell me. But if you don't have maple syrup, you could definitely just use some high quality oil, and you just need a few tablespoons of it to mix in with your herbs and your garlic salt to make a nice, kind of a ball of herbs that you're then rubbing all over the roast. So once I had it coated in salt and pepper and I added my herb and maple syrup mixture, then it was time to roll it in the caul fat. Again, so easy. I took a little while to decide where I wanted to place it on my piece of caul fat, because I didn't want to waste 1 centimeter of this amazing stuff. By the way, if you aren't having pigs butchered anytime soon and you really want to try this caul fat, you actually can buy it online. Kind of crazy. I'll leave information in the show notes. But otherwise, if you don't have caul fat, this is still a fantastic recipe. Don't worry if you don't have that. Still try out this herb mixture on your pork loin, because it's really good. Also keep in mind that when you are doing your roasting time, you want the big piece of fat that is on every piece of loin roast. You want that fat on top when you're cooking it, because you want the juices of the fat to soak down into the meat as it slowly bakes. The caul fat, miraculously, if there were some places that it wasn't sticking really well, the braising it in the hot skillet made it just like, what's the word I want to use? Just right together. Like totally meld to itself. So once I had braised each side, I had no problem with the caul fat coming off in any spot. It was on there to stay. I simply wrapped it around the roast. I thought it would be complicated. I kept looking up different resources for, well, how exactly do I do this? Am I going to need to use toothpicks? And I was shocked at how easy it was. You see, the caul fat is a consistency that it's kind of, sticky is not the word, molding. Maybe it molds with the heat of your hands even. I'm not really sure why, but it will stick to itself and it will stick to your meat. So there's no need for toothpicks or any special way to get it to stay together. You just cover your meat with it. Just use kitchen scissors to cut it the size that you want. And just press on it in the right ways, in the right places to get it to stay where you want it. The braising smelled so good. The only tips I would give you with that is, number one, do not skip it. Don't even consider skipping it, because it makes the absolute most amazing flavor in your meat, and it gives you this wonderful crust when your roast is done. So to do that, to braise or brown my roast, I got my cast iron skillet really hot. I added a few tablespoons of some of our lard. You only need maybe at the max probably a minute on each side. So you do want to get every angle of the roast on the hot skillet. And then you're ready for the oven. So I wound up using a roasting pan, but you just take your meat right from the skillet where you've browned it, put it right in the oven. Like I said, at that point, the caul fat is really securely attached. It's really easy to move it, no problem. Our roast was 4 pounds, and I cooked it at 325 for a little over 3 hours, right around 3 hours. You can use a thermometer to tell the internal temperature to know that it's done. So then once my roast was in the oven, I was ready to experiment with my sausage. And I was so excited. And I can't tell you how excited I am that it turned out beautifully. I had doubters in my family. That's not going to work. And I doubted myself because until I started working with this cull fat, I kept thinking, what's going to keep the casing on the sausage? Like, I don't want to waste a bunch of it to try and tie it and leave extra on the end. And is it really going to stay together? Trust me, it really stays together. You don't have to waste any of it. So I took my sausage meat. By the way, if you want a sausage recipe, I'll be sharing that in an upcoming video, so stay tuned. It's really delicious. And of course it uses maple syrup. I got my sausage and I simply rolled a roll of sausage just by hand. It was nothing fancy and not perfect at all. And then I laid that on my cull fat and I rolled it up. I cut it just the right size and played with it a little bit. In fact, one of my pieces was a little short. It didn't quite meet up to the other end of the sausage, but I just played with it so that the meat kind of squished in there. And then, like I said, the cull fat even sticks to your meat itself, so it worked out fine. Once I put it in the skillet, in my hot lard, or you can just use oil, the cull fat just beautifully formed around the meat and made a perfect, wonderful casing. You do want your skillet to be extra hot, and you do want it to get a nice, dark, blackened color on the outside, because then you've really got the perfect amount of that cull fat seeping into your sausage, giving it more flavor and more moisture. So good. So there you have it. I highly recommend, if you have pigs in your future, if you will be butchering pigs in the future, make a note of this. Don't forget, you want the cull fat. We did have our pigs butchered right here on our farm. The butcher came to us. It was no problem for him. We just watched him take it right off of the organs and hand it over to us. So there you have it. Like I said, if you don't have cull fat now or in your future, that's okay. Try out this recipe. I'll put the full details down in the show notes. You know, there's something really easy that you could do that would mean so much to our family. It would support our small sugar bush and the family farm here in New England if you just hit the subscribe button to this YouTube channel. And if you'd like to know about upcoming content when it comes out about real food, delicious stuff, homesteading, simple living, and making maple syrup, just hit the bell as well, and then I will make sure that you know when the new stuff comes out.